The afternoon sun filtered through the towering Douglas firs along Highway 97, casting dappled shadows across the winding forest road near Bend, Oregon. Jake Morrison had been driving this delivery route for 3 years, hauling packages between the small mountain towns that dotted the Cascade foothills. He knew every curve, every pothole, every scenic overlook where tourists liked to stop and snap photos of the wilderness that stretched endlessly beyond the asphalt. But on this particular spring day, something made him slow his delivery truck to a crawl. At first, he thought it was just another fallen log blocking part of the shoulder, a common sight after the recent storms. Then his eyes focused and his breath caught in his throat. A massive black bear lay motionless beside the road, her dark fur matted with mud and forest debris. Even from the cab of his truck, Jake could see the unnatural stillness of her body, the way her limbs were splayed awkwardly against the gravel. Her belly was visibly swollen, and a dark stain of blood had pooled beneath her hind leg, seeping into the earth. Jake pulled over and sat for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. In all his years driving these mountain roads, he'd seen plenty of wildlife, deer, elk, the occasional cougar slinking through the underbrush. But he'd never encountered a bear in distress like this. The animal was clearly alive, he could see the shallow rise and fall of her chest. But she made no attempt to move, even as his diesel engine rumbled nearby. He reached for his phone and dialed the number he'd memorized years ago after his first wildlife encounter. Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary, located just 20 miles south of Bend. The sanctuary had a reputation throughout Central Oregon for rescuing and rehabilitating injured wildlife, and Jake had heard stories of their work from other drivers and locals. Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary, this is Sarah speaking. Hi, this is Jake Morrison. I'm a delivery driver, and I've got a situation here on Highway 97 about mile marker 142. There's a black bear down by the roadside, and she's hurt bad. Looks like she's been here a while. Sarah's voice immediately became focused and professional. Can you describe her condition? Is she conscious? Any visible injuries? Jake squinted through his windshield, trying to assess the situation without leaving his truck. She's breathing but barely moving. There's blood coming from her back leg. He paused, studying the bear more carefully. Her belly looks swollen, like she might be pregnant or recently gave birth. We'll dispatch a team immediately. Can you stay with her until we arrive? Don't approach the animal, but keep other traffic away if possible. Already on it, Jake replied, positioning his truck to create a barrier between the bear and the road. Within 30 minutes, a white van marked with the Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary logo pulled up behind Jake's truck. Dr. Emily Carter stepped out first, a woman in her early 40s with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind eyes that had seen too many injured animals over the years. She was followed by Marcus Rodriguez, the sanctuary's lead animal handler, and 2 volunteers carrying medical supplies and a portable stretcher designed for large wildlife. Dr. Carter approached the bear slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. She'd been the head veterinarian at Evergreen for 8 years, and in that time, she'd treated everything from injured raptors to orphaned mountain lion cubs. But something about this bear's condition immediately set off alarm bells in her mind. She's in severe shock, Dr. Carter murmured to Marcus as they knelt beside the animal. Look at her teats. They're engorged with milk. She's recently given birth, probably within the last few days. Marcus nodded grimly, already scanning the surrounding forest. Should we search for cubs? After we stabilize her. Right now, she's our priority. The bear, whom Dr. Carter had already begun thinking of as Willow, a name that seemed to capture both her graceful form and the resilience she'd need to survive, offered no resistance as the team carefully examined her injuries. The wound on her hind leg was deep but not life-threatening, likely caused by a fall or encounter with another predator. More concerning was her overall condition: severe dehydration, exhaustion, and the telltale signs of a mother who had been separated from her young. "Her eyes," whispered Jen, one of the volunteers, a college student studying wildlife biology. "They're so empty." Dr. Carter had noticed it, too. In her years of treating wild animals, she'd learned to read the subtle signs of trauma and grief. Willow's dark eyes held a depth of sorrow that went beyond physical pain. This was a mother who had lost her babies. The team worked efficiently to sedate Willow and load her onto the stretcher. As they prepared to transport her back to the sanctuary, Dr. Carter sent Marcus and 2 other volunteers to search the surrounding forest for any sign of cubs. They spent the next 3 hours combing through the underbrush, following game trails and checking hollow logs and rocky crevices where a mother bear might have hidden her young. What they found instead painted a grim picture. Wolf tracks crisscrossed the area, and several patches of ground had been disturbed, showing signs of a struggle. In a small clearing about a quarter-mile from where Willow had been found, they discovered tufts of black fur and small scraps of what might have been cubs' fur scattered among the pine needles. "Wolves," Marcus said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "Probably a pack. They must have found the cubs while Willow was away foraging." The volunteers stood in the empty clearing, the silence broken only by the whisper of wind through the trees. Nature could be beautiful and terrible in equal measure, and this was one of those moments when its harsh realities struck with particular force. Back at Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary, Willow was placed in a specially designed recovery enclosure, a spacious wooden structure lined with fresh straw and equipped with a heat lamp to help regulate her body temperature. The sanctuary's facilities were modest but well-designed, with separate areas for different types of animals and a small veterinary clinic where Dr. Carter could provide medical care. For the first week, Willow remained in the corner of her enclosure, facing the wooden wall with her back to the world. She refused food and water, accepting only the 4 fluids that Dr. Carter administered to keep her from becoming dangerously dehydrated. Her wound healed slowly, but her spirit seemed broken beyond repair. Each night, the sanctuary's overnight volunteers reported the same heartbreaking sounds, deep, rumbling growls that echoed through the wooden hallways like a mother calling for children who would never answer. The sound was so mournful that even the most experienced staff members found themselves pausing in their work, moved by the raw grief in Willow's voice. "She's mourning," Dr. Carter explained to the volunteers during one of their weekly meetings. "Bears form strong bonds with their cubs, and the loss of her babies has left her in a state of profound depression. We need to be patient and give her time to heal emotionally as well as physically." But as the days passed, Willow showed no signs of improvement. She grew thinner despite the team's efforts to tempt her with honey, berries, and other favorite bear foods. Her coat lost its luster, and her eyes remained fixed on the wall, as if she were trying to disappear into the wood itself. It was during Willow's 2nd week at the sanctuary that fate intervened in the form of another rescue call. A local hiker named Tom Bradley had been exploring the trails near Mount Bachelor when he heard faint whimpering coming from a grove of aspen trees. Following the sound, he discovered a torn plastic bag containing 4 newborn golden retriever puppies, their umbilical cords still attached and their eyes not yet open. The puppies were barely alive when Tom brought them to Evergreen. They were hypothermic, dehydrated, and clearly had been abandoned shortly after birth. Dr. Carter and her team worked frantically to stabilize them, setting up a makeshift nursery in one of the smaller enclosures and taking turns bottle feeding them every 2 hours around the clock. The volunteers named them Sunny, Maple, River, and Finn, names that seemed to capture their golden coloring and the hope that they might survive despite their traumatic start in life. Sunny was the smallest, a tiny ball of fluff who seemed to have the strongest will to live. Maple and River were slightly larger and more robust, while Finn, though not the smallest, appeared to be the most fragile, often struggling to take his bottle and sleeping more than his siblings. Despite the team's dedicated care, the puppies cried constantly, their high-pitched wails echoing through the sanctuary day and night. They huddled together for warmth, but nothing seemed to comfort them completely. They were searching for something that no amount of human care could provide, the warmth and security of a mother's presence. The sanctuary's hallways filled with a symphony of sorrow, Willow's deep, mournful growls from one end of the building, and the puppies' desperate cries from the other. The night shift volunteers found themselves moving through the facility in hushed tones, as if afraid to disturb the grief that seemed to permeate every corner. It was during one of these long, difficult nights that Dr. Carter made an observation that would change everything. She was making her rounds, checking on both Willow and the puppies, when she noticed something different about the bear's behavior. Instead of facing the wall she had for weeks, Willow was standing near the front of her enclosure, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something. Dr. Carter followed Willow's gaze and realized that the bear was looking in the direction of the puppy's room. For the first time since her arrival at the sanctuary, Willow seemed alert and engaged with her surroundings. Her ears twitched at each puppy cry, and her body language suggested not agitation, but rather a kind of focused attention. Standing in the dimly lit hallway, Dr. Carter felt a spark of inspiration, or perhaps desperation. Traditional wildlife rehabilitation protocols would never recommend what she was considering. But sometimes the most profound healing came from breaking the rules. She thought about Willow's engorged teats, still producing milk weeks after losing her cubs. She thought about the puppy's desperate need for maternal comfort. And she thought about the mysterious ways that grief and healing could intersect in the animal world. Without allowing herself to second-guess the decision, Dr. Carter quietly entered the puppy's room and gently picked up Sunny, the smallest of the four. The tiny golden puppy fit easily in her cupped hands, his soft fur warm against her palms. He whimpered softly but didn't struggle, perhaps sensing that he was being carried towards something important. Dr. Carter approached Willow's enclosure slowly, speaking in the calm, reassuring tones she used with all the animals in her care. "Easy, girl. I have someone here who needs you." Willow's reaction was immediate and complex. She lowered her massive head and let out a soft growl, not threatening, but cautious. Her nostrils flared as she caught the puppy's scent. And for a moment, Dr. Carter wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Bears were predators after all, and even a grieving mother might see a small puppy as prey rather than a surrogate child. But then something extraordinary happened. Willow's growl softened into something that sounded almost like a purr. She stretched her neck forward, bringing her nose close to the tiny golden form in Dr. Carter's hands. Her sniff was gentle, investigative, and when Sunny instinctively nuzzled toward the warmth of her breath, Willow didn't pull away. Dr. Carter held her breath as she slowly lowered Sunny toward Willow's front paws. The bear watched intently, her dark eyes following every movement. When the puppy was finally within reach, Willow carefully extended one massive paw and drew him closer to her body. Sunny, guided by instincts older than thought, immediately began searching for a teat. Willow seemed to understand what he needed. She slowly lowered herself to the straw-covered floor and rolled slightly onto her side, exposing her belly. The puppy latched on immediately, and the soft sound of nursing filled the enclosure. Dr. Carter stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe as she witnessed this unprecedented moment. A wild black bear was nursing an abandoned golden retriever puppy, and both animals seemed to have found exactly what they needed. Willow's eyes, which had been empty and lifeless for weeks, now held a spark of purpose. Her body relaxed in a way that Dr. Carter hadn't seen since the bear's arrival at the sanctuary. The sound of gentle suckling mixed with Willow's deep, rhythmic breathing, creating a lullaby that seemed to calm not just the puppy, but the entire sanctuary. For the first time in weeks, the building was filled with peaceful sounds instead of cries of distress. Dr. Carter remained in the enclosure for nearly an hour, watching as Willow carefully adjusted her position to make Sunny more comfortable. The bear's massive paws moved with surprising delicacy, and she occasionally lowered her head to sniff the puppy, as if reassuring herself that he was real and safe. When Sunny finally fell asleep, still nestled against Willow's warm belly, Dr. Carter knew that she had witnessed something that would change both animals' lives forever. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. 3 more puppies waited in the next room. And if Willow was truly ready to become their surrogate mother, the real work was just starting. The next morning brought a mixture of excitement and apprehension to Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary. Word of Willow's acceptance of Sunny had spread quickly among the staff and volunteers, and everyone was eager to see if the remarkable bond could be extended to the other 3 puppies. Dr. Carter approached the situation with scientific caution, but her heart was filled with hope. She had spent a sleepless night researching cross-species adoption in the wild, reading every case study she could find about surrogate mothers in the animal kingdom. While such arrangements were not unheard of, the specific pairing of a black bear and domestic puppies was unprecedented in her experience. "We need to introduce them gradually," she explained to Marcus and the other staff members who had gathered for an impromptu meeting. "Willow has accepted Sunny, but we can't assume she'll automatically accept the others. We'll bring them over one at a time, and we'll monitor every interaction closely." The introduction of Maple, a slightly larger puppy with a distinctive white patch on her chest, went smoothly. Willow sniffed her carefully, then gently guided her to join Sunny at her belly. River, the most adventurous of the 4, actually crawled toward Willow on his own, his tiny paws scrambling across the straw as he sought the warmth and comfort that his instincts told him should be there. Finn, the most fragile of the puppies, required more patience. He was weaker than his siblings, often struggling to nurse effectively, and Willow seemed to sense his vulnerability. She was particularly gentle with him, using her massive paws to position him carefully and making soft rumbling sounds that seemed designed to encourage him. Within 3 days, all 4 puppies had been successfully integrated into Willow's care. The transformation in both the bear and the puppies was remarkable. Willow's appetite returned, and she began eating the fish, berries, and specially prepared meals that Dr. Carter provided. Her coat regained its luster, and her eyes held a brightness that spoke of renewed purpose. The puppies, meanwhile, thrived under their unusual mother's care. They grew rapidly, their golden fur becoming thicker and more lustrous. They learned to navigate around Willow's massive form, climbing over her legs and nestling into the thick fur of her belly. Most remarkably, they seemed to understand that they were safe. Their constant crying ceased, replaced by the contented sounds of healthy, well-cared-for babies. Willow's maternal instincts extended far beyond simply providing milk. She groomed the puppies with her tongue, carefully cleaning their faces and bodies. She created a warm nest for them in the corner of her enclosure, arranging the straw with her paws to form a comfortable bed. And she was fiercely protective, growling at any unfamiliar sounds or movements that might threaten her adopted family. This protective instinct was put to the test one night during the puppy's 3rd week with Willow. Marcus was working the overnight shift when he heard an unusual commotion from the direction of Willow's enclosure. He grabbed a flashlight and hurried toward the sound, arriving just in time to see a large gray wolf slinking away from the building. The wolf had apparently been drawn by the scent of the puppies and had managed to get close to the enclosure before Willow detected its presence. The bear's response was immediate and dramatic. She rose to her full height, her fur standing on end, and let out a roar that echoed through the forest. Her claws scraped against the wooden floor as she positioned herself between the wolf and her babies, making it clear that she would defend them with her life. The wolf, faced with an angry mother bear, quickly retreated into the darkness. Marcus watched from a safe distance as Willow remained alert for several more minutes, scanning the perimeter of her enclosure before finally settling back down with the puppies. The incident reinforced what everyone at the sanctuary already knew: Willow had fully embraced her role as their protector. It was around this time that Noah Patterson began visiting the sanctuary. The 12-year-old boy was the son of Linda Patterson, a longtime volunteer who had been helping with animal care for several years. Noah had always been interested in wildlife, but his visits had become more frequent and more focused since his mother's death from cancer 6 months earlier. Linda had been one of Evergreen's most dedicated volunteers, often spending entire weekends at the sanctuary, helping with everything from cleaning enclosures to assisting with medical procedures. Her death had left a void not only in Noah's life but in the sanctuary community as well. Dr. Carter had encouraged Noah to continue visiting, recognizing that the boy found comfort in the company of animals and in maintaining a connection to something his mother had cared about deeply. Noah was drawn to Willow's enclosure from his first visit after the bear's arrival. He would sit quietly on a wooden bench that Marcus had placed outside the enclosure, sometimes reading aloud from books he brought from home, sometimes just watching the unusual family with fascination and wonder. "She's like a real mom," Noah observed to Dr. Carter one afternoon as they watched Willow carefully grooming Maple's golden fur. "Even though they're not really her babies." Dr. Carter nodded, struck by the boy's insight. "Sometimes the strongest families are the ones we choose," she replied. "Willow lost her cubs, and these puppies lost their mother, but they found each other, and that's created something beautiful." Noah seemed to understand this concept in a way that went beyond his years. He had lost his mother, and in some ways, he was searching for the same kind of connection that Willow and the puppies had found. His quiet presence at the sanctuary became a regular fixture, and the staff noticed that he seemed most at peace when he was near Willow's enclosure. Willow, for her part, seemed to recognize something special about Noah. She would often position herself near the front of her enclosure when he was reading, her head resting on her front paws and her ears twitching at the sound of his voice. Sometimes she would make soft rumbling sounds that seemed to harmonize with his reading, creating a peaceful atmosphere that drew other visitors to stop and listen. As the puppies grew larger and more active, the sanctuary staff realized that they needed more space to accommodate the unusual family. Using funds from a recent grant, they constructed a larger outdoor enclosure that included both covered and open areas, climbing structures for the puppies, and a small pond where Willow could cool off during the warmer months. The new enclosure, which the staff dubbed Willow's Haven, became one of the sanctuary's most popular attractions. Word of the remarkable cross-species adoption had spread through social media, and visitors came from across the Pacific Northwest to witness the extraordinary bond between the black bear and her golden puppies. Dr. Carter was initially concerned about the attention, worried that too much human interaction might stress Willow or interfere with the puppy's development, but she soon realized that Willow seemed to enjoy showing off her family. The bear would often bring the puppies to the front of the enclosure when visitors arrived, as if proud to display her successful mothering. The puppies, now several months old, had developed distinct personalities. Sunny remained the smallest but had proven to be the most determined, often leading his siblings in their explorations of the enclosure. Maple was the most social, always the first to approach the fence when visitors arrived. River lived up to his name by being the most adventurous, constantly finding new ways to climb on Willow or explore every corner of their habitat. Finn, though still the most delicate, had grown stronger under Willow's care and showed a particular affinity for water, often playing in the shallow pond while his siblings preferred dry land. The media attention brought unexpected benefits to Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary. Donations poured in from around the world, allowing the facility to expand its programs and improve its facilities. A documentary crew arrived to film Willow and the puppies, and their story was featured on national television programs and in wildlife magazines. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the local community. The town of Bend officially proclaimed Willow as their ambassador of compassion, and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife cited her story as an example of the complex, emotional lives of wild animals and the importance of wildlife conservation. As autumn approached, the sanctuary staff faced a difficult decision. The puppies were now old enough to be adopted, and several families had expressed interest in providing homes for them. These weren't ordinary adoption requests. The families who applied had all followed Willow's story from the beginning and understood the unique background of these particular puppies. Dr. Carter spent weeks interviewing potential adopters, looking for families who would not only provide good homes, but who would understand and honor the special bond that the puppies had formed with their bear mother. She wanted to ensure that the puppies would be placed with people who appreciated their story and would continue to support the sanctuary's mission. The Hendersons, a family from Portland with experience in animal rescue, were chosen to adopt Sunny and Maple. They had been following Willow's story since the beginning and had made several trips to the sanctuary to meet the puppies. Their application essay moved Dr. Carter to tears as they described their understanding of the miracle of love that had brought Willow and the puppies together. River was adopted by the Johnsons, a retired couple from Eugene who had lost their own golden retriever the previous year. They had been hesitant to get another dog until they heard about Willow's story, which convinced them that love could take many forms and that healing often came from helping others. Finn, the most fragile of the four, was adopted by Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a veterinarian from Seattle who specialized in caring for animals with special needs. She had driven to Bend specifically to meet Finn after hearing about his story, and she promised to provide him with the extra care and attention he would need throughout his life. The adoption day was bittersweet for everyone at the sanctuary. Noah sat beside Willow's enclosure, his hand resting on the fence as he watched the puppies play together for what might be the last time. The boy had grown attached to all of them, but he seemed to understand that they needed to move on to the next phase of their lives. "They'll be okay," he whispered to Willow, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned about loss and healing. "They're strong because of you." Willow seemed to sense that something was changing. She was more attentive to the puppies than usual, grooming them extensively and keeping them close to her side. But when the adopting families arrived, she didn't try to prevent them from taking the puppies. Instead, she watched quietly as each of her adopted children was gently lifted from the enclosure and placed in the arms of their new families. The most touching moment came when little Finn was being carried away. The fragile puppy, who had struggled so much in his early weeks, turned back toward Willow and let out a soft whimper. Willow responded with a gentle rumble, a sound that seemed to say, "You're safe now. You're loved." After the puppies were gone, the sanctuary fell into an unusual quiet. Willow retreated to her favorite spot under a large pine tree in her enclosure, her gaze fixed on the forest beyond the fence. The staff worried that she might fall back into the depression that had marked her early days at the sanctuary. But Dr. Carter had learned to trust Willow's resilience. "She's not depressed," Dr. Carter explained to the concerned volunteers. "She's processing. She did what she needed to do. She saved those puppies and gave them the love they needed to survive. Now she's ready for whatever comes next." What came next was a new role that no one had anticipated. As word of Willow's success with the puppies spread throughout the wildlife rehabilitation community, other sanctuaries began reaching out to Evergreen when they encountered orphaned animals that needed surrogate mothers. The first case arrived in early winter, a pair of orphaned fox kits whose mother had been killed by a car. The kits were old enough to eat solid food, but still needed the comfort and security of a maternal presence. Dr. Carter was hesitant to ask Willow to take on another surrogate role so soon after losing the puppies. But the bear's response was immediate and positive. Willow accepted the fox kits with the same gentle care she had shown the puppies, allowing them to curl up against her warm fur and providing them with the security they needed to overcome their trauma. The kits stayed with her for 6 weeks before being transferred to a specialized fox rehabilitation facility, but the experience established Willow's reputation as a surrogate mother. Over the following months, Willow cared for a succession of orphaned animals, bobcat kittens, raccoon babies, even a pair of orphaned black bear cubs who had been found after their mother was killed by poachers. Each case was different, but Willow's approach remained consistent. She provided warmth, comfort, and protection to any small creature that needed it. Noah continued his regular visits to the sanctuary, and his relationship with Willow deepened over time. He had started volunteering on weekends, helping with basic care tasks and reading to the animals. His presence seemed to calm not only Willow, but many of the other animals at the sanctuary as well. "You know," Dr. Carter said to Noah one afternoon as they watched Willow playing with a pair of orphaned squirrel kits, "I think you and Willow understand each other in a special way. You've both learned how to turn your loss into love for others." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "My mom always said that the best way to heal a broken heart is to help fix someone else's." As spring returned to the forest around Bend, Willow's story continued to inspire people around the world. The sanctuary received visitors from dozens of countries, all wanting to meet the bear who had become famous for her capacity to love across species lines. Scientists studied her behavior, trying to understand the neurological and emotional mechanisms that allowed her to form such strong bonds with animals so different from herself. But for the staff at Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary, Willow's significance went beyond scientific curiosity. She had become a symbol of hope and healing, proof that love could transcend the boundaries that seemed to separate different species, different families, different kinds of loss. Dr. Carter often stood at the edge of Willow's enclosure in the early morning hours, watching the bear as she gazed out at the forest that had once been her home. Willow could never return to the wild. Her interactions with humans and domestic animals had changed her too fundamentally. But she had found a different kind of purpose, one that seemed to fulfill her in ways that surprised everyone who knew her story. The enclosure had been expanded again, now covering nearly an acre and including natural features like fallen logs, rocky outcroppings, and a larger pond. Noah had convinced the sanctuary to hang small wooden bears from the trees around the perimeter, his tribute to the wild mother who had taught him that families could be formed in the most unexpected ways. As the anniversary of Willow's rescue approached, the sanctuary planned a celebration to honor her first year at Evergreen. The event would raise funds for the facility's expansion and bring together all the families who had adopted animals that Willow had helped raise. The Hendersons planned to bring Sunny and Maple, now full-grown golden retrievers, who still bore the calm confidence that their unusual upbringing had given them. But perhaps the most meaningful aspect of the celebration would be the quiet moments, Noah reading to Willow under the pine trees, Dr. Carter watching as the bear gently cared for whatever orphaned creature currently needed her attention, and visitors from around the world standing in silent wonder at the sight of a black bear whose capacity for love had no boundaries. Willow had lost her cubs in the cruel randomness of nature. But she had gained something more, a purpose that extended far beyond her own species, a legacy of compassion that would inspire others long after her story had become legend. In the end, she had proven that the deepest healing often comes not from forgetting our losses, but from using them to understand the losses of others. At Evergreen Wildlife Sanctuary in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains, a black bear named Willow continued to open her heart to any creature that needed the warmth of a mother's love. And in doing so, she had become something more than just a rescued animal. She had become a teacher, showing humans and animals alike that love in its purest form knows no boundaries.